Of course, the New Testament writers took the themes of Moses' creation story to one final step. Not only did they look at Christ's first coming as the beginning of a new creation, and to the continuation of the kingdom as a time when individual people enjoy the effects of the new creation in their lives, but they also applied creation themes to the final stage of Christ's work, the consummation of the kingdom. At least two passages in the New Testament stand out in this regard. First, Hebrews chapter 4 refers to Christ's return in terms of Moses' creation account. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, "And on the seventh day God rested from all his work. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God, for anyone who enters God's rest also rests from his own work, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest." Just as Moses used God's Sabbath day in Genesis chapter 2 to spur Israel toward Canaan, the land of rest, the writer of Hebrews saw God's Sabbath day as an ideal prototype of the ultimate redemption we will experience when Christ returns. In the same way that God ideally ordered the world in the beginning and brought about Sabbath joy, when Christ returns in glory, he will reorder the world and give his people the joy of the final Sabbath rest. As we long for this day, we are told here that we must make every effort to enter that rest which will come when Christ returns. Finally, one of the most magnificent passages that identifies Christ's second coming in terms of Moses' creation account is Revelation chapter 21, verse 1. Listen to the way John applied the creation themes to the return of Christ. "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea." John spoke of a new heaven and a new earth, and this phrase recalls Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, which records that God created the heavens and the earth. Moreover, John said that in this new world there would no longer be any sea. You recall that in Genesis chapter 1, verse 9, God restrained the sea, keeping it within boundaries so that dry land could appear and form a safe habitat for the human race. In the new world, after Christ's return, we'll find that the salt seas will be entirely removed from the earth and replaced with fresh, life-giving water. The work of Christ is similar to the days of creation in Genesis chapter 1, but in Christ God will go further, much further, in bringing the ideal order to completion. The entire universe will be recreated into new heavens and a new earth, and God and his people will enjoy that new world together. Unfortunately, Christians often disconnect their eternal hope from the creation. We assume that we'll spend eternity in a spiritual world up in heaven, but the New Testament is very clear about this. Our final destiny is a return to the Sabbath ordained in the seventh day of creation. We will spend eternity in the new heavens and new earth. This was the hope of Israel in the days of Moses, and it is our hope even today. When we follow the guidance of the New Testament, we should approach the opening chapter of Genesis as more than a mere record of what happened long ago. It's also a portrait of what God has done in Christ's first coming, what he's doing now in our lives day by day, and what God will one day bring to completion when Christ returns. In all three stages of Christ's kingdom, God moves against the chaos of sin and death in the world and in our lives. In the inauguration, continuation, and consummation of the kingdom, he sets the world on a path to its ideal end, a wonderful new creation for his people. In this lesson, we've seen four main ideas: the overarching purpose of Genesis chapters 1 through 11, the structure and original meaning of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3, and the ways the New Testament applies the themes of the creation account to Christ and to our lives. The implications of this approach to Moses' creation record for today are astounding, to say the least. As Christians living today, we need to see how Moses' original purpose in Genesis applies to our lives in Christ. Just like the Israelites who first heard the opening chapters of Genesis, we are easily discouraged as we follow Christ in this sinful world. But as Moses encouraged his readers to believe that they were on God's way toward his ideal world, we should also be encouraged as we walk God's amazing path toward this ideal world in Christ.